Hi, I'm Donald Robertson. I'm the author of How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, the Stoic Philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, and I'm very privileged to be here today to talk to Markus Wachter, the CEO of Carnuntum, and we're at Carnuntum in Austria, and this is important in terms of Stoic philosophy and the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. So I'm going to talk a little bit to Marcus about the location here and the relevance of it to the subject that we're interested in. And the first thing I wanted to do, Marcus, is just begin with a little bit of an overview. If somebody came to Carnuntum, what are the main things that they would actually see here in terms of archaeological areas and reconstructions and so on? Yeah. What do you have here?
Yeah. No, we're sitting here in the Basilica of a reconstructed Roman thermal bath. And this is one of the highlights here in Carnuntum. Unique worldwide, we reconstructed a Roman city quarter on its actual spot where it was in Roman times. And what makes it unique is that every facilities are fully functioning. So the underfloor heatings are fully functioning. The ovens in the kitchens are fully functioning. We have water in the ponds of the thermal bath, and so this is this is our main attraction, and it's a city quarter of the former civilian town of Carnuntum, and besides that we also show 2 amphitheaters, a museum. Then the Hedion's Gate, so it's the most popular Roman monument in Austria.
Yeah, it's famous.
So it's a lot to see there.
And so you've got the civilian area, and then there's also the military camp as well, right? Could you tell us a little bit about what's there?
Yeah, you see, only 1% of Carnuntum, or former Carnuntum, is excavated.
Right, really?
So it was a huge town. The ancient town covered an area of some 10 square kilometers, and only 1% is excavated. So the military camp, the nucleus of the Roman town, has been excavated in the late 19th century, but has been buried again to conserve it. So you cannot see it. We show it with a virtual reconstruction, and we also built a scale model of Carnuntum in the scale 1 to 300, where we show the extension and how Carnuntum looked like in the late 2nd century AD. So the time of Marcus Aurelius.
Marcus Aurelius, And so you have various maps and models showing an overview of the area, and then you have these beautiful reconstructions. Like you said, we're in the baths at the moment, and I don't know, the microphones probably won't pick this up, but we can hear the running water in the background, the functioning baths. And so do you know roughly what the population of Carnuntum would have been during the time of Marcus Aurelius?
Yeah, so a very solid estimation says it must have been at least 50,000 inhabitants, but maybe even more. But 50,000 is the lowest estimation of the population here. So it was one of the largest towns, Roman towns, north of the Alps.
Right. And Carnuntum was the capital of Upper Pannonia, is that correct? Yeah. So you have some exposed archaeological ruins here, and then you have the reconstructions as well. You have 2 amphitheaters and the gladiatorial training schools. And then there are the 2 parts of the museum as well, in the civilian quarter, and where the military camp is as well. And so how would you sum up what the importance of Carnuntum would have been to the Roman Empire in general, and perhaps in particular in the Roman Marcus Aurelius?
Carnuntum was, as I said, one of the largest towns in north of the Alps.
Yes.
And it has also a very important strategic function, because it was one of the greatest fortifications along the river Danube.
Yes,
it was the northern border of the Roman Empire, and Carnuntum was one of the major fortifications along this northern border of the Roman Empire, and it also has had a very importance in economic affairs, because Carnuntum was situated at the crossroads of the most relevant, most important trading routes. So it was situated at the crossroads of the Limes Street, the so-called Limes Street, running from east to west, and of the Amber Street,
The Amber Road,
starting in Aquileia at the Mediterranean and going up to the Baltic Sea. So, and Carnuntum was right at the crossroads of these two trading roads.
So important both in terms of military strategy and defence of the empire's frontier, and also in terms of this crossroads of trade routes. Excellent. And so what would life have been like at Carnuntum? I guess both in the civilian area first of all, and then we can talk about military life here. But what would it have been like for the people that actually lived here?
I think life was very luxury. You see how splendid this Roman terminal bath was, and right beside this Roman terminal bath we show Villa Urbana. It was a splendid city mansion with mural paintings and also underfloor heating, and I think life must have been very pleasant here, because for long times it was a very peaceful region here, except of the Marcomannic Wars, but for centuries life here was very peaceful, and it was very safe, because during 400 years a Roman legion was situated here. It's 5,000 soldiers, and besides that also an auxiliary camp with a horse. With
cavalry?
Cavalry. Sorry, was situated here with some 500 soldiers. So it was a very safe situation here.
One of the things I'm actually interested in is looking very closely at the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. Some of the things he mentions, I wonder if they can be related to his life here. And one of the things he mentions in passing is that one must learn to accept certain things in life that one can't change. And the example that he gives is you can't stop horses from neighing, and you have to learn to accept the sound. But there would have been many horses stationed at Carnuntum, presumably. He's perhaps describing what life is like around him. So the Carnuntum would have been a relatively wealthy city because of its position in the trade routes, and it was therefore well defended. But I suppose it would have also therefore been have been attractive to the barbarians or the tribes as a place to loot.
But also you must imagine it wasn't the Limes wasn't a strict border. It was you can imagine you can compare nowadays to the Schengen border. So it was the outer border of the Roman Empire, but it was very don't know the word.
Fluid.
Open. Yes. Because you have trade between the barbarians and the Romans. And for example, we have in the museum one very nice find. We had the hair, a part of hair, with woven with golden strings of a barbarian lady. So it was it was a fashion accessory for wealthy Roman ladies.
Right. And so what would life have been like in the military camp here? I suppose in many ways similar to the civilian. I should mention there is one thing I remember that some of the Romans complained about when they came here. Or Marcus Aurelius in particular, we told, struggled with the climate. He wasn't used to the winter.
Of course, for a real Roman, it must have been a shock to the climate, because you have you have winter, and it's very humid in spring and in autumn. But the Romans learned to deal with it. I think at the time when the Romans first came here to Carnuntum, it was in the year 6 AD. It must have been very forested here.
Right, yeah.
And the Romans started to cultivate the land, and they used the forest, the wood for the houses and for the heating of the underfloor heatings. And but I think at the time in the 2nd century, in the 3rd century, it must have been a very flourishing and very lively town here at the northern border. And you see it because people here, they tried to imitate the status of Roman life.
Right, right.
So they tried to imitate it here to the northern border.
Oh, there was a question that I wanted to ask you about Marcus Aurelius' time here, actually, which I suppose we'll come on to now. What's the relevance of Carnuntum in particular to our hero, Marcus Aurelius, your namesake, Marcus Aurelius? So one of the questions I wanted to ask you specifically, would the emperor have had a residence in the civilian area, or would he have lived mainly when he was here in the military camp?
No, I think we don't know where the residence of Marcus Aurelius was, but it's very probably that he stayed in the palace of the governor.
The governor's residence, he would have
the governor's residence, because there he had also his own troops for his own safety, for his protection. So it's not very probable that he stayed here in the civilian area. So.
And the governor during Marcus's time here would have been Claudius Pompeianus, is that right? Or who was the governor at that?
We don't know. Don't know.
But so Marcus spent some time here during the first 3 years?
From 171 AD to 173 AD.
And then in 174, was he stationed in another part of the frontier, or did he return to Rome then?
No, I think he moved southwards to
Sirmium?
I think nowadays in the land of Serbia.
In Serbia, right,
Serbia,
right.
Yeah.
To fight the Sarmatians further.
Yeah.
Okay. And so during his time here, Marcus was involved in the First Marcomannic War, and then there was the Civil War with Avidius Cassius, and Marcus travelled more at that time. He toured the eastern provinces. But then there was another outbreak of war, the beginning of the Second Marcomannic War. Did Marcus spend any time at Carnuntum during the Second Marcomannic War?
Don't
Do we know? We don't have very much information about that time.
Maybe.
It's a possibility.
But we don't have information. We know these 3 years that he spent the time in Carnuntum, and that he wrote the second book of his meditations here in Carnuntum, because he finished it with the written at Carnuntum.
Very helpful of him.
Yeah.
He said he writes at Carnuntum, and then he also writes at the end of the first book, among the Quadi, by the Granua. So this would be across the river.
Yes, but it's also possible that it was in Vindobona, or it was in Skaplantia, so we don't know. So but these 3 years we have the information that he actually spent here.
He was here at Carnuntum at this time. Yes, and that must have been a big change for him, because actually, as far as we know, he'd never really travelled much outside of Rome or Italy anyway. This seems to have been the first time that he really led the army. Previously, it was his adopted brother, Lucius Verus, that he'd assigned that role to. And then Lucius Verus actually died in 169 AD and kind of left Marcus to be sole emperor. And I think, in a way, he was perhaps thrust into this position that he perhaps didn't feel entirely cut out for the military role. But the military seem to have, over time, have embraced him as their leader.
Yeah.
Because, for example, the Aurelian column in Rome celebrates things like the thunder miracle and the rain miracle.
And also from the column in Rome, we know that he spent here in Carnuntum, and at the column the bridge over the river Danube is depicted, and we know that the exact position we don't know. Right. There was some. It's probable that it must have been in the nowadays town of Bad Beitsch-Altenburg. It's the neighbor town of Petronell Carnuntum, where we are at the moment.
Right, right. And actually, also in that column, the river god is depicted.
Yes.
So for the Romans, the Danube, I should say, which we're right beside, was extremely important and also kind of symbolically important. It was personified as this river deity. And it must have loomed very large in their lives. It was, as I understand it, there was also a navy that sailed, and there would have been trade across the river.
It was trade. It was trade across the river, and the river Danube in Roman times looked totally different than nowadays. So it was a swamp. It was a swamp with, and it was a huge area, and it was easy to defend with small boats, we know that the harbor of the Danube fleet was also situated in Carnuntum.
Right, right. So I think actually, sometimes when we read the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, his writing seems so personal and intimate. Sometimes I think it's difficult to imagine the scale of the legions that he commanded, and in some ways it's difficult to imagine his status as emperor, because when you read the Meditation, he seems almost a solitary figure, a very personable figure, like an ordinary guy in some ways. We imagine like the scale of Roman operations here were very impressive. And also there are a number of scenes that are very vividly described by the Roman historians. In particular, Cassius Dio tells us that in the winter, when the Danube froze over, there was one particular battle where the Romans engaged the Sarmatians on the surface of the river, and they had to learn special tactics to be able to fight on the ice without losing their footing and slipping. So it was important as a frontier, and in terms of the trade that went on, it was symbolized to them by this river god, but also they even fought battles on the river. And one of the things I mentioned earlier that interests me is when Marcus is talking about natural phenomena, the little birds that he sees around him become symbolic to him. I noticed when we first came here, I heard there are many birds here, obviously, and Marcus in the Meditations says that being attached to external things is like falling in love and setting your heart on a little sparrow, and before long it suddenly flits away and disappears into the distance and is gone forever. And he says even our own lives are fleeting like this in material things. But when we come to Carnuntum, we see these things that he was talking about even in the Meditations. We shot a video the other day where we were standing next to the Danube and quoting some of the passages in the Meditations, just to kind of put them in this context where he talks about the river of time and how the river for Greek philosophers and Roman philosophers symbolizes the transience of all material things. So it's nice to do that in this environment and see, Marcus this would have been something that he perhaps looked at every day and saw around him. Could you say any more about what you think we can learn about Marcus's life or his character or his philosophy from his time at Carnuntum? How do you think his experience here might have affected him?
I see, for me, that's my personal impression and interpretation of Marcus Aurelius. I think he was one of the first CEOs. So he acted in difference to other Roman emperors, like a CEO, that he had his team and he trusted his team, so he had time to think about things. So he wasn't that involved in battles and war. So he had his commanders who did the things for him, and he had time but his obligation was to manage the whole thing. So for me, as the CEO of Carnuntum, when I looked to Marcus Aurelius, for me, he was one of the first. He was very modern in his managerial things.
I think also to come back to something you perhaps touched on earlier, it seems to me that Marcus, we think about the legions and the battles and so on, but I get the impression that Marcus was particularly concerned with diplomacy and the negotiation of various peace treaties. And that was one of the things that he invested his time and energy. He spent probably a lot of time talking to the leaders of the tribes across the Danube, and not just campaigning against them. So I wanted to wrap up actually just by asking you one more question, and that is there anything in particular that's here that you like to tell people about or show them? What's your favourite thing here to share with people?
No, I think as you mentioned it before, I think the unique thing besides the attractions, the reconstruction, is the whole atmosphere. So it's so close to Vienna and Bratislava, so it's just half an hour from these two cities apart. And if you come here, you get into a different world. So it's you think you are in the Mediterranean, and that's fascinating for me. Half an hour to the west is Vienna, a very lively metropolis, and then you come here and you can breathe, you can relax, and you get into a total different world. You dive into a total different world, and our claim and our promise for visitors is the past begins here.
I mean, certainly anybody I think watching the video as well can see from the wonderful room that we're in, like it really does feel as if we're back in Imperial Roman times and getting a flavour of like their life and how colourful things were as well here. Okay, so Markus Wachter, CEO of Carnuntum, thank you so much for your time and
thank you
answering
for coming
our questions.
Here. And good luck with your book.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to encourage everyone, if they have a chance, to come along and visit Carnuntum and see the things that are here.
Okay.